Welcome to the Alignment Show, where we talk with people who've made bold moves to live in line with what matters most to them. Life's too short to spend it on things that don't fit. And if you're feeling that pull to realign, you're in the right place. These conversations are here to inspire and support you on your own path. Let's meet today's guest. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome once again to the Alignment Show. Things look a little different as I'm getting started here today. Those of you who follow along with us know that our disabled daughter has been in the hospital for a little over a week in the critical care unit. We thought we were going to lose her at one point, but she seems to have rallied, and I'm grateful for that. But it also means that our usual production situation has been disrupted, I guess you would say. So I'm not going to take the time today to go into a full setup. We have an episode that we recorded not too long ago with Jeff West. You know that Jeff West is one of our stars in Alignment. Jeff is one of a small group of people who can come on the show anytime they want, because I know they always bring value for our listeners. And he recently co-authored another book with Bill Cates, not Bill Gates, but Bill Cates. It's called The Hidden Heist, and it is out now. I think it came out September 16th, and so I wanted to get that episode up as soon as we could. I'm in the little dining area of the critical care unit, and so I don't have my camera with me. The audio quality is no doubt worse because there's air conditioning and machines and stuff running. I just didn't want to put off any longer airing this episode. So let's just quickly say that this episode is sponsored by Butterfly Copywriting. You've heard us talk about Val Tees before. And so you can find out more about what she does for writers on getting their message out on LinkedIn by going to donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/butterfly. And also by my own books. You can find that at donking.com/books. I've got a new one out. Ironically enough, it's about caregivers, or more specifically, creating while caregiving. How do you keep writing, doing your art, making your music, whatever it might be, while you take care of your responsibilities? And while it does have a direct link, you can find all of my books at donking.com/books, including the new one. And so I would invite you to check that out. So I'm not sure I'm going to do much of an outro on the other end. We may just go into the end music. But in any case, I think it will be worth your time to spend with Jeff West. So let's turn it over to myself to introduce Jeff. All righty, thank you for that introduction, Don. As no doubt I said, because at this point, I honestly don't know what I'm going to say to introduce Jeff. But at the risk of repeating myself, Jeff is one of the stars in Alignment here on the Alignment Show. That's just a half dozen or so people. At any time they want to come on this show, they can do so, because they always have something cool to share with our audience. And so, Jeff, thank you for coming on here with us once again today.
Oh, I am honored that you'll have me, my friend. I always love being on your show.
Well, we always have a good conversation. You're always doing something interesting. And you know, I thought about this before we started recording and then didn't comment. That stack of books behind you is getting taller and taller.
It's starting to grow. We've just got the fourth one now, and I've already committed to the fifth one and the sixth one. So it's an exciting time. When I retired from my old job, I thought I was going to retire, and I immediately started doing other things. And I'm kind of glad, though, because I'd rather rust out than wear out, or I'd rather wear out than rust out.
I knew what you meant. Oh, yeah. And yeah, I don't know if you're getting the same thing. I retired from my college teaching job a little over a year ago.
Mhm.
And, my wife keeps saying, you're busier than ever, so Yeah, but like you say, I just don't want to sit on the front porch. And there's so many exciting things to do there. So your latest book out there, and that's the one that's kind of most prominent there, The Hidden Heist.
And then right here.
There we go. Okay, and I'll have a when we do the post production. Well, actually, I can kind of show it right here. Hold on just one second. We got to play with this if we can. There it is.
See, you're a
Okay.
techno guy. I would
Yeah.
mess that up so quickly.
Oh, man. And we'll have a link to it as well. So coming out
Appreciate that.
in all formats, I think, by the time this episode is out, should be out in all formats. Is that
That
correct?
is correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So this one is another business parable, which is something you specialize in. So
It is.
regular
Yeah.
listeners to this show will know what we mean by business parable, but you know how it is with podcasts and recording. Somebody may come across this. Let's make sure folks know not just what is a business parable, but what are the strengths of a parable that lead you to write those instead of just writing maybe a fiction book or just writing a business book, which you are eminently qualified to write.
Well, that's such a great question. For me, the reason I have gravitated toward the business parable genre is because I remember the first time I read one. It was by Og Mandino, someone you know very well, and who it was called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And it just changed the way I approach learning things. And over the years, I've read many topical nonfiction. I've written a lot of topical nonfiction manuscripts and all that. But the reason that I've gravitated toward the business parable is pretty simple. It goes back to a concept that I'll teach when I'm doing sales workshops called fusion points. And when you create this combination of positive emotional experiences in the brain, well, the brain, as soon as it has that emotion, it shoots a somatic marker down, and people love the way that feels. And if you connect a positive emotional experience with a logical premise, so when logic and emotion communicate in the brain and you produce a decision, well, it's making the person comfortable moving forward. But in a learning example, it also makes the lesson stick. If you can, that's why even in a topical nonfiction book, I would encourage people to put in stories that illustrate the point because that's what's going to make it stick.
Mm,
And then when I write my parables, my goal, very simply put, is I want to write fiction that is so strong that people would read it even if they weren't learning anything. And then I want to come up with characters that are so flawed, so human, so somebody that we can all relate to. And then I want them to live the story rather than just tell the story.
mm.
That because in that scenario, you know as well as I do because you're one of my favorite parable authors. If the characters are very thin, what's like the review you put on for Amazon for the Hidden Heist. If the
Mhm.
characters are very thin, it almost becomes like a veiled PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But when you really engage the reader's mind with a character that they start to care for, and then that character learns lessons, oh gosh, it makes all the difference in the world in how I feel creating it, but it also makes all the difference in the world in how a reader feels when they consume it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, when I started reading Hidden Heist, um, see how would I put this? I didn't think I had time to read it. I thought, yeah, I really ought to read this because my friend Jeff wrote it. And then I found myself, I want to know what happens next. And I said, yeah, I want to learn these lessons. God knows I need to understand finance better. But then I had to resist the temptation to jump to the end to see if certain characters were still alive, and that kind of. So that tells me the story is engaging. Okay, now
Mhm.
I'm wondering, and I agree 100% what you're saying about even if it's a straight nonfiction book, you need to have stories because that's the thing that makes it unique. People
Right.
can't get it somewhere else. I'm wondering what you think about this kind of thing in an age of AI.
Mhm.
And we're certainly not against AI on this program. Okay? It's
Right.
just a tool. You got to learn how to use it effectively and all that sort of thing. But still, in an age of AI, if you're just looking for information, you can go on YouTube, you can go on Google, and with AI especially.
Right.
Folks, before we started recording, Jeff and I were talking about how just with technical kind of stuff, you can go to your AI and say, I need to accomplish this. How do I do that? That seems like it means that straight nonfiction is going to be less valuable to an average reader in book form. And so finding a way to make it more than just information is going to be not only important for writers to continue to have an impact,
Right.
but for readers to benefit from reading a book. Now,
Oh,
does that feed even more what you're doing with business parables and that sort of thing?
I hope so, and I think so, and I think you described the environment very well there. It's like even in part of my world, my primary world is writing. That's what I want to spend all of my time doing. But then as an author, of course, you have the entrepreneurial side of it you've got to take care of and all of that. But then I also do the sales workshops, leadership workshops, and things of that nature. And I've done coaching for entrepreneurs in the context of all of that, just like you said, a good AI assistant, Chat GPT or whatever, can go out and do the research for anything. But what's going to be the separator, the differentiator for all of us is going to be the ability to make that human connection. And in writing, especially the topical nonfiction, you uh, even in the case of just a straight-laced, here's how you do this kind of book, it will be the stories that are created that go in there that illustrate the point that will keep that author working. And with the business parable genre, I think it's a step up above that for you and me and the others that write business parables because you're combining not just a story that illustrates a point. If you do it well, you're having the reader and the characters live the story where they learn the lessons. And that's what makes the connection happen. And I think the more and more we get into artificial intelligence and as things go on, I think the more you're going to see those people, regardless of the industry, regardless of what the position or the product is, it's the people who can make that personal, real connection that will attract business and will still make things happen for them in their business context. Kim Angeli, a mutual friend of ours, I heard her say recently, says people aren't interested in paying for information. They're interested in paying for community and how you think about something. They want to know how you think about something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's something that at this stage AI can't do. Who knows? One day I may sit up here and just have a little talking head and you can interview me that way, but I don't think so.
Oh my. Well, and there's always going to be room for the bespoke connection.
Right.
So, just thinking in terms of how this book developed, uh, and for listeners as well as for Jeff, what I want to do is talk a little bit about this book. And then we also, because this is not primarily a show about writers or for writers, but the nature of the alignment show is such that we
Right.
draw a lot of writers, and I'm sure there's a lot of writers that are listening. So I want to dig a little bit into the process, but
Sure.
we're not just geeking out for writers here. So okay, so the hidden heist, I would say that yes, it's a business parable, but it's really oriented towards personal finance in a
It
very
is.
real way. So,
It is.
just without giving away spoilers and that sort of thing, what would you tell us about the hidden heist for people to understand the nonfiction, what it's about, but also the story that draws people in?
Well, thank you for that. That's a wonderful question. Basically, the hidden heist is a personal financial parable that our goal with that was to take people who have learned a lot of really maybe inaccurate mindsets, inaccurate stereotypes in their head about money. They don't really understand. They've been telling themselves the wrong story and turn that, teach them what the reality of the stereotype may be, or the reality of the money concept may be. And so we wanted to kind of destroy those money myths But then later we wanted to teach some really good, sound, basic financial habits that anyone can do. And the earlier you start, obviously, the better, but anyone at any age can do that will make a difference in how their future is financially. You know, my co-author Bill, has probably 40 or 50,000 followers in the financial advisor industry. And so to a certain extent, that's where he's been working. But this is more him teaching, where what he was doing before is he was teaching those advisors how to get more clients. So it's really designed, but it's designed to help individuals. If I were going to say a target age range, probably 18 to 50. But people older than that need to get it too, because they need to give it to their adult kids who don't know what the heck they're doing about money. But
Uh,
someone could literally take this, and if they'll apply what they learn, they're going to change their financial future. But the story itself, oh, I'm so proud of the story, Don. This was the most fun story and the most challenging story I've ever written. We set the entire parable on money management in the middle of one day at a bank robbery. The very first line of the book is "Everybody on the floor."
yeah, that's an
And
attention grabber. Yeah.
it starts like that from the beginning. And the audio book, oh, the guy that we hired to do the audio book is a voice actor named Jonathan McLean. He does such a tremendous job with all the characters. But we wanted to do something that had an edge, but then at the same time, with a parable, you can't just leave it edgy. You know, as you know, Lisa Wilbur and I said the lady with the blue hair, and I started that off with in a little bit of a sad place, but then I got it out of that. And with the Hidden Heist, Bill and I wanted to make it a little bit edgy, but at the same time, we both knew you can't leave it there. So I started throwing in humor, started throwing in surprises. I've got some things in there. My favorite compliment that I've received on the book yet actually came from our mutual writing coach, John David Mann. And I had sent him the manuscript. This was this was when he was reading my first polished draft. And I sent him the manuscript. And later that evening, I get a text from John, and he said, "I did not see that coming." Best compliment of my life on my writing.
And I would agree with him, by the way. There were several things in there where I said, man, I did not see this coming, and yet it fits. You know, it's like
If you go back, you catch the Easter eggs on it too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like again, without giving spoilers for people who haven't seen the movie, although surely at this point, pretty much everybody has seen it. The movie The Sixth Sense.
Right.
You know, at the end of it, you're going, no way, no way. And they even go back and give flashbacks so you can see that, yeah, it really does fit, you know.
Well, and I hate to even tell people that there could be spoilers, but I do the same thing that we're doing here. And it's because when I saw The Sixth Sense, I'd heard so much that there's something surprising in it. Literally, the scene where he's sitting on the park bench at the very beginning, I said, I know what's happened here.
Uh-huh. And so did you know what had happened just for seeing him there? Okay. So, you know, without giving too much here, almost any good story these days, there's going to be a twist,
Right.
you know. And so it's no surprise that there will be twists.
Right.
What I would say with that, you know, and again, you know, you and I are both writers. I knew there would be twists in there somewhere, and yet I still didn't see it coming.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, even for something later in the book, I'm thinking, how the heck is Jeff going to get this character out of this plausibly? That's the thing, plausibly. You know. In fact, let me ask a related question here. We've already commented on how sometimes with a parable, not only will the characters be a little thin, but the plot would be a little thin in the sense that as you're reading, you're going, this would never happen. This would never really happen. And so I'm wanting to make sure I don't give too much of a spoiler here. We've already said it's happening in the context of a bank robbery.
Right.
Okay. You can anticipate with it being a business parable if there's going to be some conversation going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought that you did an excellent job of making the fact that a conversation and this conversation would be taking place despite the fact that there are people with shotguns around. Now, this is where we're starting to get into the craft thing. Okay. So
Right.
Did you have a story like that in mind and you went looking for a co-author who had something to teach that would fit the story? Or did Bill come to you and say, here's what I want to teach? You come up with a story that would do that. And regardless, I want to ask, how the heck did you come up with that?
Oh, there's so many good things in that question.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
first, first off, Bill came to me. I did not know Bill. Bill, very famous for what he does. Has a big following. He used to be I think they call him the president of the National Speakers Association,
Yeah.
and you know how big that outfit is. And he's got a huge following in financial services. And here's how he came to know of me. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. He had decided that he wanted to do a book teaching the financial principles that he wanted to teach and destroying the money myths that are out there. And all of his other books are how-to things. He's teaching financial advisors how to use referrals to get more clients. That's what he does. And so once he decided wanted to do this different subject matter, he thought, well, a parable is the right way to go on that. He said, who do I call for a parable? I'm calling Bob Berg. And so he calls Bob and he said, Bob, I'm thinking about doing this story. Tell me about this John David Mann guy. And Bob said, and I quote, you can't afford him, but I got a guy. That's true. John's fees more than mine. So Bob made that mutual introduction. Bill and I got on the phone and we agreed on what we were going to do on the book itself. And then we were brainstorming the ideas. And he wanted it to have an edge. And I honestly can't remember if he was the first one to mention the bank robbery or if I was the one that mentioned it. But
Came out
we
of
started brainstorming.
conversation,
Yeah,
regardless.
we were having a conversation. We did the entire book start to finish on Zoom as far as how we would relate to each other. And then of course you're emailing back and forth on things, but and the so that's where the embryo of the concept started. And then I started thinking it out. Okay, we're talking about people that are held hostage by their money beliefs. So I just started thinking about the hostage scenario. I literally interviewed a real life hostage negotiator. He's retired now or semi-retired, and I had a couple of really good long interviews with him, and a lot of the things that the reader gets that make the story richer, that are kind of how some of those intricacies worked. That was through him. I mean, that's how I got that. I interviewed another friend of mine. This part was my wife's idea. I interviewed another friend of mine who I worked with for years that was actually in the middle of a bank robbery.
Mm.
And in that scenario, I won't go too far. And even though this is one of those spoilers they find out in the first chapter,
Mhm.
there's certain things about Alden that's what my friend was experiencing at the time that he went through the bank robbery. And so I interviewed him on that. Bill interviewed another hostage victim that was in a bank robbery. Hers was much more intense.
Mhm.
But so I started thinking those things out, and the interviews helped a lot. And as I just kept letting it progress, the interesting thing about this whole process, I would send Bob Berg is always one of my early readers, even on early drafts. And I was sending him drafts, and he was getting fired up like it was a great movie already because he liked what I was doing with the characters, and he was laughing out loud where you're supposed to laugh out loud. I mean, it was all working. But the person in the story that it basically takes that hero's journey. The it's a character named Bobby. I won't go much further than that.
Mhm.
But I knew where Bobby was going to start, and I knew where Bobby was going to end. That came to me very quickly in thinking out the story arc and all that. But everything in the middle was part of a rewrite.
Mm.
As you do know the process, you get your first draft on paper, as John David Mann likes to say, write drunk and edit sober. And he doesn't mean that literally, but I've tried that a couple of times. No, I'm kidding. But I had the whole thing mapped out, but I didn't have that hero's journey for that character yet.
Mhm.
And
So
since I knew
I know I'm
how.
interrupting, but did you, as
Yeah.
you're doing the rewrite, did you go back consciously thinking about a save the cat structure or a hero's journey structure, and then try to hit those points?
It's somewhat, basically what I had to do was do it in such a way. The unique thing about how Bobby's story is communicated is it's not always, it's most of it, 99% of it is not verbal.
Yeah,
And that's hard to pull off in a book.
yeah, 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 yeah. And now that I think about it, the descriptions were not overdone. The internal dialogues, which you used italics to kind of
Mhm.
immediately show a reader, this is something that somebody's thinking,
Right,
not overdone.
right.
Okay, the dialogue helped to move it along. Um, yeah, I've just got all kinds of praise for it. There's, and I'm going to really step gingerly around this. There is a twist that you probably know exactly what I mean when I say I really did not see that one coming. Was that part of the rewrite, or was that something that you thought of from
No,
the
that was
beginning?
part of my original story arc.
Okay, good, good. And from a craft standpoint, the reason that I'm saying that is, or asking that is that I could see where if that came to you later, you would also then have to step back in some earlier chapters to plant some foreshadowing
Right.
that would not have been there. We'll get a little crafty here. When Stephen King wrote The Green Mile, he wrote it
Hmm.
in six parts. It was a serial.
Right.
And then when they later put it out as a single book, it is not just the six parts that were put together, because he said something happened in part six that he realized he needed to have something setting it up in part two.
Right. Right.
Okay, so how much of that sort of thing did you have to do? Does that make
And
sense?
yeah, it does make sense. And I had that part of the story arc planned from the beginning.
Okay.
When I decided how I was going to take the characters, I knew who the mentor was going to be. I knew who the person who comes out the other end in in whatever way. I'm trying not to spoil my own
Right, right,
spoiler
right.
alerts here.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah.
But I knew the arc, which included the points you're talking about. I knew how it was going to end. I knew how I was going to begin it. I knew certain things that I would have to reveal before the end, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. But the what came in that rewrite was more about the typical protege journey.
Mm.
Well, if you're going to write a good parable and then you got a mentor and a protege, the protege can't start off saying, "Well, boy, that's right. I'm going to go do that." The protege's got to push back. Got to they got as I forget who the person who said this was, but John taught it to us in class, but it wasn't his original. He said, "A good story arc. You got a hero. You get them up in a tree. You throw rocks at them, then you get them back down."
Yeah, yeah. That's
And so
I have heard that before, and I can't remember the original source either. But
yeah, but that
and
story arc's where it comes from.
oh yeah, yeah. It's occurring to me here for listeners. We want to be sure we get this connection. We're talking about Bob Berg. We're talking about John David Mann. They were co-authors of the Go Giver series, and it was
Right.
through that series that Jeff and I met to begin with. A group kind of oriented around that. But both of them have written other books, bestsellers. So that was a collaboration between the two of them,
Right.
and that's where a lot of this comes from. So yeah, that whole idea of throwing rocks at them and just how much trouble are you going to get them in? I mentioned Stephen King a little while ago. He is what we would call a pantser, writing by
Mhm.
the seat of the pants. He starts
Right.
out with interesting characters, puts them in an interesting situation, complicates their life, and then follows them around to see what happens. And
Right.
reportedly, he's got a half a dozen or more manuscripts to where he got them in such a situation and then he couldn't figure out how to get them out, how to get them down from the tree, so to speak. And so, the manuscript just went nowhere. You spent all those hours and hours on it. The other extreme is the pantser. No, I'm sorry,
Hmm.
we're talking about the pantser, the outliner.
Right.
What's the other word? It's a P word that is just
Planner. No,
Plotter. There we go. Plotter.
plotter.
Okay. So these are terms that writers kind of throw around amongst themselves. Reportedly, J.K. Rowling not only knew how Harry Potter would wind up at the end of the first book, she knew where they would wind up at the end of the seventh book before she ever
Right,
started writing the first one.
right.
I'm getting the sense you're somewhere in between, as most of us are.
I
Okay.
am.
So you had the whole arc. Were there times as you were writing that you intended for, so to speak, you intended for Alden to go down to the end of the street and turn right, and instead he went the other direction and turned left? That the characters took over?
Mm, yes, uh, that always happens to a great extent. In the Hidden Heist, it was probably more the other characters in the vault that
Mm,
did
okay.
that. Because I'm like you said, I will start with a general outline, a story arc that I know I'm going to do. Like when I started the Hidden Heist, I knew how I was going to start it. I always make a list of characters, and then beside my list, literally, I start listing out their flaws, like on Dylan on the Hidden Heist. First thing I put in there is smart aleck. Well, actually, a different word. I put smart ass, just like I was at age 20, you
Yeah.
know, kind of thing. But I had different people and it was their story that took different turns sometimes.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
and what Lisa Wilbur and I said, the lady with the blue hair, same thing there. I knew I was going to do some sort of a conflict at some point, didn't have any idea what it was. And so there was a conflict that happened between her and her daughter, or not conflict, but an emotional moment, and then a little bit of a romantic moment. That those came from me writing.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
when you so I'll have that story arc, I'll have the outline, but I don't let it handcuff me. Sometimes I literally write with my eyes closed because I'm pretty decent on the keyboard, and I literally just let the story go, and I'll write what I'm seeing in my mind, and it's like I'm watching a movie that the book is.
Mm. Eavesdropping on the dialogue and that kind of thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can polish it later.
Yeah, and that's there's another one of those old sayings that all good writing is rewriting.
Right.
So give yourself permission to get it on the page. But it's always fascinating to me when the characters take over. Now, you know what my favorite quote from the book is. I don't know if you remember it or not. Um, it's without we don't want spoilers, but there's one of the characters that looking at another character thinks. Let me see if I get it close to right here because I don't have it in front of me. Um, Something like ignorance is fixable through knowledge.
You can fix ignorance
Dumbassery is
with knowledge.
permanent.
Dumbass is permanent.
I gotta ask, where did that come from? Is that something you had, or is that something Bill had out of his experience with people and their financial? It's not ignorance, financial stupidity.
No, it actually is a saying that I've said for decades. And I would, you know me, I'm a big cut up anyway. And so if I've got to handle something that's not a comfortable discussion,
Mhm.
I will throw a lot of humor in it. And I was managing, the first time I remember saying it, I was district manager with an insurance carrier, and I had a guy that just wasn't listening, just wasn't listening, just wasn't listening. And finally, I looked at him and I said, "You know what?" He said, "What?" I said, "I can fix ignorance with knowledge, but dumbass is permanent." And, and it's been mine ever since. I may have heard it somewhere before, I don't know, but that was my co-author's favorite quote too, Bill's favorite quote from that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I wondered if that was a Texas thing. But that's something that you came up with in an experience situation. And what I love about the root story is you didn't just think it, you said it to somebody. Did it penetrate in the original conversation? Did that make any difference to the person you were trying to help?
He
Not really.
laughed, but no, he still didn't start listening.
So it's really permanent. Okay.
Well,
Um,
it's like in my sales career, I literally had my first boss in the sales career told me, he said he was talking about making cold calls in the marketplace. We made them face to face. And he said, if you don't run into at least one a-hole every week, you're not working hard enough. And he had a serious look on his face. And I
Yeah.
said, okay. And I went into a place on a Monday morning, and it was the industrial uniform industry is very blue collar, very difficult anyway. And I walked in the door and I told the girl, my name's Jeff West. I'm with Rental Uniform Service. And the owner was standing behind her, and he went off on me. He interrupted, he went off on me. He started talking about the evils of the uniform industry and how we were all owned by the mafia and this and that. And in the middle of it, I just started giving him that old Georgia boy grin. He stopped mid-sentence. He says, boy, how can you be grinning at me with the butt chewing I just gave you? And I said, well, my boss told me if I didn't run into at least one per week, I wasn't working hard enough, and I got you out of the way on Monday morning. I started laughing. And he looked at me and he started laughing too. And he says, you got guts. I'll say guts. He said, you got guts. And
Yeah.
he actually did business with me. He rented mats.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard about this guy before. So, yeah. Oh,
So I'm not recommending that as a sales technique if you have any salespeople watching your show.
yeah. But you got to respond to the actual situation. And I'd say you
Right.
read that one. Okay. Um, and from a craft standpoint, one of the things I'm doing here is showing how, whatever you write, you bring your own experience, your own
Yes.
insights into it.
Yes.
I would venture to guess that with each of the characters, not only in Hidden Heist, but in Streetwise to Saleswise, and the lady with the blue hair, and what's it, the unexpected tour guide. That's where you started out. There's a little bit of you in every character somewhere. Accurate?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I'll tell people that will tell me, Mo, I've always wanted to write a book. I feel like I've got a good book in me or whatever. And then they say something like, but there's so many out there that cover the subject. And there's like, what is it, 1 million books or 2 million books released every year. So I get that. But I tell them the same thing. It doesn't matter because if you write a book and you write it from your own truth, nobody else is going to have that perspective. No one else is going to have that concept. No one else is really going to have that. So it's important to do it anyway. And if it's a
Mhm.
marketable concept, great. And then because I want every author out there to make a lot of money and feed their business that way and feed their families. But it is exactly what you said. If you're writing your truth into the storyline, into the characters,
Mhm.
it makes it more authentic. It makes it more enjoyable for the reader. And it's one of the things I love about doing it.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, let's come at it from this direction. One of the bits of advice, maybe bad advice, that we would hear as writers is write what you know. Well, that's kind of hard for science fiction writers because we've never been to Saturn. But even in that setting, we could say, like to you, um, again, without giving too much of this story away, we've already mentioned it's a hostage situation. Okay, so
Right,
you've
right.
never been a hostage in a bank robbery.
No,
Okay. You've never been, there are several women characters that I think you develop very effectively. You've never been a woman, as far as I know. And so,
never even identified as one. So
yeah, yeah. But within each of those people, there's an experience that you have had as a human being
right,
that you can apply there. Some of the best science fiction stuff is really about human relationships
right.
and how we deal with the unknown and how we deal with stress and all those kind of things. So I could see where you're pulling bits of yourself into those characters. How much of it is the basic thing of writing, which is the what if? What if I were in this situation and I had had the experience that this character had had growing up, whatever it is? So that leads me to a related question: is how much character sketch, kind of, background sketching that you do that doesn't show up in the book directly, but
Right.
affects the book?
Oh, there's a ton of it. I literally, it's varied a little bit depending on the amount of time I have to do that, especially if I've been doing a contract book.
Mhm.
But um, I will do character mapping basically. And it's not about what they're going to do in the story, it's about who they are.
Mhm.
If I give them a particular name, in almost every case, I give them a particular name because it means something. If you go research that name, you find out a little Easter egg I leave in my books in most cases. Uh, if I literally go so far as to talk about in my mind, where did they grow up? What are their personality quirks? Are they are they sanguine? Are they melancholy? Are they are they are they outgoing? Are they introverted? I mean, I'll go through all these things, and when I do that, even though it doesn't make it into the story, it does make it into the story in a sense because as I write their mannerisms or as I write what's going on, it flows because that's how I see that character doing something in that scenario. You nailed it right on the head. You
Mhm.
think about, or at least in my case, I think about what I would do in that scenario, and then I think about, okay, how would that character feel? What would they feel like? And I try to have as high of a level of empathy about it as I can because I want to experience it like the character does. I
Mm.
want to feel that so that I know how to write what they would feel at the time.
And that's interesting you mentioning that because we were joking a little while ago, and you named the character, so this is not a spoiler thing. The Dylan character,
Right,
who
right,
was the smartass that you were at age 20, and I had the sense that you weren't holding him up as a stereotypical, for lack of a better term, stupid. You know, I think he's. This may not be a spoiler. He's related to somebody there, and then so they've got some family dynamic going on a little bit. We all have somebody like that in our family. Dylan was not a stereotype, even though he was fulfilling a certain kind of minor character
right.
role, and I had that sense of empathy that seemed to come through you for him. Now you weren't making him smart. So there's a question here. I'm trying to think about how to make it clear. How far do you go with a relatively minor character to try to make them not cardboard, and yet you don't have the time as a writer to spend the kind of time developing their backstory that you do
Right,
for the primary characters? Does that make
right.
sense?
It does. And in the case of the hidden heist, I got two sets of things going on. Got the bank robbers, and I wanted to have that same exact dynamic that you were talking about there, how I would write that, how I would make it work. Then you got the characters in the vault. The characters in the vault, what I did in that case is each character basically is in the storyline is living out is representing a mistaken money belief. And people will get it in their mind. Well, I can't build wealth. I grew up poor. I can't. Wealth is for other people, not me. Or we always fight over money, and my parents always fought over money. That kind of thing. And so when you get people that have that mindset, when it comes to them building anything significant, they're building anything that when as they get older, that they have a nest egg that's ready. It's tough for them because their mind is going in a different direction. So I use the characters inside the vault. Each one kind of represented some of the mindsets that Bill and I wanted to
Mm,
challenge the mindset, I guess is the best way to say it.
yeah.
And so each character that's in there represents part of that. The characters that are the bank robbers, I primarily wrote those for my own entertainment, and everybody else seems to like it.
Well, and I can see that. And I mean, you need them to present from a story standpoint to present the barrier or the challenge, the danger.
Right, right.
But for each character to represent a mindset, that is such an effective way to make a parable, not a sermon,
Right.
if I can put it like that.
And that's
Um,
something that was really important in this case. Bill, his background is the how-to stuff. He was
mhm.
not, that's why he wanted to get help on when he wanted to do a parable. And I did like John does. I took on the lead writer role, but I still wanted to involve Bill in a lot of what was going on and all that. And it was fun to see that relationship between he and I as it was going on because as we were going into the story, I could sense, okay, he's not completely comfortable with where I'm taking that. And there was once I told him, said, trust me a little bit on this. Let's get it together. Trust me on this.
Mhm.
And he's like, it's so fun. When we finished and it was in the hands of the production company, he and I have had fun like kids because he has just been so at times giddy and excited because he and I both we were talking about this afternoon. The official launch is on Tuesday the 16th, but we were talking
And that's for
about
anybody
how
who's watching in the future. This is Tuesday, September 16th, 2025.
thank you.
Yeah.
But we were talking today, and he was just he was giddy about so many things. And we were talking about how the reviews on Amazon, because we did it in a way that we could get some early reviews in there, have all been. I told him, I said, if we keep getting these reviews like this, people are going to think that we've sent them a bunch of money. Because when we've sent out the promotional copies of the book, like the people who endorsed and all that, we put it in a bigger box and then we put gold tissue paper around it, and then we put a stack of fake money, $10,000 on top, and send it to them. But I said people are going to think we did real money on that. But
Oh
but we were
man.
also talking about how um, we, no, and he's had best-selling books out there, and I'm not talking about like Amazon bestsellers. I'm talking about on other bestseller lists.
Mhm.
And he's never had the buzz that he's seen on social media that he has on the Hidden Heist. And
That
that
makes
makes me feel good because the story that he was wondering if he was going to be okay with is just playing like wildfire out there. People are
yeah.
loving it.
Was there a point where, as either you talked with him or he read the story as it was developing, that he went, "Wow." Now, and I'm this is obviously I'm fishing for something here. I'm just
Right.
wondering, like, was he surprised by it, or did he ultimately get to a point of, that's really a reasonable resolution, and it makes me hopeful for my own material here.
Yeah, he liked it, but he also wanted to see how our beta readers felt about it, and
Uh-huh.
all the beta reader feedback was just tremendous. And
Good.
the endorsements when we sent it out to people for endorsements, it was like it went, oh, this is fun, this is good, and that was yeah. So that was a good experience. But I love him to death. He has been he's been good for me in a lot of ways, because this is the first book that I've ever written with somebody that I didn't know beforehand. I wrote my
Hadn't thought
own
about it.
book, the first one. I knew Lisa for, I don't know, a year or so or more before we started, Said the Lady with the Blue Hair. I'd known Bob for 20 years. Bill, I didn't know.
Mhm.
So there's a certain amount, okay, we got to see how the relationship is going to, the dynamics are going to be on there. And it was really good.
Mhm.
But it's also one of those things that reminds me, there's a story that Bob Berg will tell about John David Mann. And it's about reframing an issue. And of course, reframing meaning somebody is coming to the table with this perception in their mind, and you need to shift it a little bit. And John, the publisher, had told a very famous person who wanted to write a book, wanted to write a parable, that they should consider John David Mann. And John's fee is significant. And he was going into the meeting, and this person who was somewhat famous, pretty famous, he said, they go into the meeting, and that guy's here says, and he looks at John, he says, are you half as good as these people say you are? And John relaxed, and he said, you know what? As a matter of fact, I am. I'm exactly half as good as they say I am. And it just took the pressure off. Well, this the Hidden Heist, writing Streetwise with Bob elevated my brand.
Mhm.
The Hidden Heist is going to elevate it even more because it's the first book that I've ever written that is more than just a sales or leadership book. It's really not. I don't. I think it's more in the self-help arena because
Yeah.
it's personal finance, but it's the first one that has the possibility of being a much broader audience, kind of like the Latte Factor did with John, and the Wealthy Barber did. I can't remember who wrote the Wealthy Barber, but those books sold millions of copies, and
Mhm.
so it could be the kind of thing where I'm thinking that was a good move, Jeffrey.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I could, in fact, I'm wondering, as you say, Bill has spent most of his career helping financial advisors as opposed to doing, personal finance himself. I'm wondering if one of the effects of this thing will be that it's a book that financial advisors can give to a current client or to a prospect that's going to
Right.
help them to understand those basic principles.
That
It
was
could
part of
kind
the
of become a
business
textbook.
idea.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The part of the business idea from the very beginning is we wanted to create something that the people who already love Bill could have something in their hands, and that would be something that they would give to their clients or their prospective clients, CPAs, things of that nature. All of them, it's good. But I can even see this getting into churches. Now, I did use a couple of bad words. They're not real bad, but that might not get them in the churches. But
We,
I can
we
even see this being something that a financial management class in a church would want to give out as part
yeah,
of it because I think it's a fun story and the principles are sound.
absolutely, absolutely. And there are some of our churches that will be perfectly fine with that. So yeah.
Mine is. Mine's a
Yeah.
non-denominational church. I think they'll be fine with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too much, but
It's
yeah,
not.
yeah, it'll obviously be there. And in a related but different direction, you mentioned that you have set really the whole book, except, well, I would even say I guess it's an epilogue. There at the end, it's really all in the same scene. And
Right.
what I'm thinking right now, and we were talking about science fiction a little while ago. One of the problems that you have if you're a science fiction author and you want it to, you'd like to see it get made into a movie. They look at it and say, "Oh, this would be expensive to shoot." If you're doing a Western and you've got 14 different settings, that gets expensive. This is all in one place. From a movie perspective, it would be
Think of,
fairly inexpensive to create. Did you think of that as you were writing it? And is that possibility, do you think?
from your mouth to God's ears and back down.
Yeah.
The every book that I write, I think of like a movie. That's part of it's how I envision the action. It's how I envision what's going on. And so, yes, to a certain extent, uh, I actually, this one would make the best movie. No, I think they're all pretty good stories, so I think they would all work. But
Mhm.
I have a contact, and I don't know if it's going to be a fruitful contact or not. But she at one point was a producer for a movie brand out there, and it was a smaller brand. But I'm going to reach out to her once this has been released. I'm going to send her a copy of the book and say, "Hey, I just think this will make a great movie. Do you know where I would go with this?"
Yeah.
Because I do tend to write it like a screen. This one is written a lot like a screenplay when you think about it, not in the formatting, but in how it's presented. There's the narration, all that. Anyway, it. I think it would make an excellent movie. I would
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll, we're doing this live, we're thinking out loud. I'll plant a seed. It may go somewhere, it may not. Um, Not only have authors become indie authors, we don't have the gatekeepers we used to.
Right.
Thanks to advances in technology and that sort of thing, there are high quality movies that are being produced outside of the standard system.
Right.
If you don't find interest in the more traditional realm, would you consider becoming an indie producer, not just an
Um,
indie
I've,
author?
I learned a long time ago to stop saying no to things I don't know about yet. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that possibility. I don't have resources, but I know
Right.
people who do. So, yeah.
Well, you
Okay.
think about it, the entire book to do a parable in one day has been unusual, and that's what this one does. It does it in one day,
Yeah.
with the exception of the epilogue. And so you've got the bank lobby, you got the bank vault.
Hmm.
Uh, that would be an inexpensive set,
And there's a command post, but it's all interiors.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you do have a couple of scenes that I threw in for comedy effect and all that happen outside.
Hmm.
So yeah, you would have a little bit outside, but outside you don't have to make a new uh, set design. So
Yeah.
I think it would be cost-wise, a pretty good one to do. I don't know if they would want to change the lessons in it or not. If it was in indie produced, then you wouldn't have to change the lessons. You could
Right.
just go with what it is because people need to learn that anyway.
Exactly.
Uh, but
I see possibilities.
who are those
Oh,
brothers that did Facing the Giants? They've made some good movies. Maybe I should get it in their hands.
yeah, yeah. Good possibility there. Well, we could talk forever, Jeff, but I want to be respectful of your time and well, how should I put this? This will probably be somewhere around episode 100, maybe episode 98 or something like that. For 98 episodes, I've been saying we try to do a half-hour program. I don't think I've done more than two, but we're actually under that. So as we come to a close here, you know that one of my favorite ending questions is to say, uh, what do you wish that I'd asked that I didn't? And what would your answer to that be? Now you may have more than one. So if you do,
Right.
that's fine. What would the question be that you wish that I'd asked? Because I've been focusing on craft and the story. You might have wanted to say a little bit more about the finance part, or something else. So opening
You
it up.
know, probably if I were going to answer that question, the only thing I can think of is where can they get the book? No, I'm kidding.
And we are going to make sure people have that. That's just going to be tacked on
Right.
after the interview. So,
Right.
folks, be sure and stay with us. And I'll go ahead and mention you can always find show notes for all of our episodes at thealignmentshow.com. I don't know what episode number this will be, but you will be able to find it at thealignmentshow.com. And stay tuned for all the information on how to find this book in every form imaginable. Maybe not the movie.
Plus, my co-author Bill, by the way, put together a great resource.
Oh, yes.
That even if people haven't bought the book or and they're not ready to buy the book, they can go to theordinarymillionaire.com and there's a free resource he's put out to teach people. Okay, these are some basics you can start doing now, and anybody can become a millionaire even if they're on salary if they develop the right habits early in their life for sure. So,
Okay. So theordinarymillionaire.com. And
mhm.
we will link that from the show notes. And if I can get it together, we will have a QR code even.
Yeah. And the only other question I really wish you had asked me is how could I be this good looking at 66 years old?
And what's your answer to that?
Well, folks, I am just kidding. I don't think that way about myself.
Oh, my goodness. There's related questions there, though, because I'm going to say it in the intro, I'm sure, but your background, you were a very successful salesperson in the insurance industry, and you trained other people in sales.
Right.
Took what I think most of us would consider early retirement because you didn't just retire this year or last year.
I retired when I was 54.
Yeah, and if I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the reason you took that early retirement is so you could spend your time doing what you love doing, which is writing.
Right. Yeah, I had written The Unexpected Tour Guide. I wrote that most of it during the fourth quarter of 2013, or at least the second half. Knew I wanted to start doing that more, and I'd sent it to Bob, and his early feedback was so good, and so he's such an encourager, and so I had decided that that's really what I want to do, and I was in a position that I could. And my wife and I talked about it, and that was the plan we did. And I went out speaking everywhere immediately, and I went out doing that. I took a little bit of a lull. The time between tour guide and blue hair was significant. And I think Don, you may have experienced this on yours too. I got such good feedback on the unexpected tour guide, and I sold a few thousand copies, and that's not normal. And
Right.
and I would sell a lot of them at events, and all. It just went well, and it played into a lot of speaking events. And then I started thinking about writing another book, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, was I just lucky? Can I do this twice? I had a very huge case of not imposter syndrome, but something like that. I think about the next book. And then when Lisa and I did Say the Lady with Blue Hair, that was the hugest shot in the arm for me. And then Bob and I doing Streetwise together, and now this one with Bill. I have the confidence as a writer now that I used to have in sales,
Mhm.
and it took a while to develop that because I didn't have it in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And so for folks who listen to the alignment show and bringing your life into alignment with your values,
Right.
there's encouragement here because Jeff didn't really start on the writing journey until he was past 50.
Yep.
And so if you're thinking it's too late for me, no, it's not.
No, it isn't.
And that's got to have something to do with how he can be 66 and so good looking.
The stress has been gone now.
Yeah. Living his values. You see, it's healthy. Well, Jeff, thank you for being with us. Is there anything else you would like to say?
No, I love visiting with you, brother. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming on anytime, and look forward to more conversations. I know you've got at least 2 more books that you're working on, so we'll have you back. And you don't even have to wait for those books. You are a star in alignment.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll turn it back over to my other self, Don. That's a wrap for this episode of The Alignment Show. What's your next step? Whatever came up for you, take action. Talk it out with a friend or just sit with it for a moment. And if this episode sparked something meaningful, share it with someone you care about. You can subscribe and find all past episodes at thealignmentshow.com. And be sure to follow or leave a review wherever you heard or watched this. It really helps more folks find the show. We'll be back soon with another thoughtful conversation. Until then, live your values and value your life.